Welcome to this edition of Inside the Human School, where we try to give you some background about how the Human School came to be, as well as talk about what we're curious about this week. So we are going to start with some background information, and we're going to use a question, which is, how do we collaborate each week? What has our process been like?
Well, we have two periods a week, a Wednesday night and a Sunday morning that the three of us hop online, and if we're not recording content, which is largely off the top of our heads with just a little bit of planning in terms of the questions and the parameters of the conversation, we're brainstorming ways to iterate and improve, and who we want to connect with, and how are we going to evolve. So we're having those conversations, and then we get together once a month for an extended period of time, face-to-face at a location, and work through a lot of what have been the outcomes that people have seen so far. So collaboration is huge. And we also are working on finding time to bring other people on. We have a list of other people that are willing to come on and chat with us and learn alongside us. So I think that's a little bit about the insights to Inside the Human School collaboration.
I mean, we
Go ahead, Chad.
So, I mean, we use a series of other, digital or web-based tools, right? So we text really all the time, all day long. We share with one another, articles and insights and videos.
TikToks.
Yep, TikToks. We also we also have Google Docs. We're using Google Docs all the time, and we keep an agenda. We have, I'll use the word protocol for lack of a better word, but we have a structure there. We're using Roam right now as a tool for those of you who aren't familiar, and maybe Randy could talk about that a little bit, but that's a tool that we're using to kind of do some action researchy tagging of some conversations. And that's been a collaborative process where we're sharing and listening and talking about and discussing it together. So it's been really important to us throughout this process that, I'll use the word, we're very meta. We're trying to do the work in public, but we're also purposefully doing the learning while we're trying to model that learning. And so again, it can be a little bit maybe complex or not as direct, but we're trying to both model and do at the same time.
And I was also going to say too, we keep trying to talk about different ways to communicate and try to talk about even things that, like Randy said, responses to what people are interested in, what we're thinking about, ideas that we just sort of like toss around if we want to work through. We tried one of the friction documents. We've done a couple of other sort of frameworks as part of our collaboration. And then even thinking about as we have these like more formal discussions, we'll continue conversations after the fact or at a later point when something made us think of or wonder about an idea or another way to kind of work together. So, yeah.
And I think some of these ideas and some of these collaborations will be good fodder for some blog posts. Mm-hmm. Right now, we're working through Chad's posts on the compass points and the mind shifts, and those will be coming to an end probably when this one gets posted, or a couple of weeks after this one gets posted. And I think we're going to start to see some blog posts around some of those things that each of you mentioned in terms of the collaboration process.
Yeah. So we can transition to the things that we're curious about this week. So for me, I have some shifts coming in my work, and I'm thinking a lot about what is it that I want to do, and what are the things that are important to me, what are my values, but then also how to work within the system. So trying to think about if I go back to the classroom full time, what does it look like to bring this work with me in a place and in a system that has some of the constraints that we all know around written curriculum and common assessments and teaching the same things in the same time frame. And so where are the places that I can play and test and try? And what is the work that I have, the groundwork that I have to do to be able to sit within my values, and then also live within the larger system on a more consistent basis. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about and I'm wondering about this week.
I've been thinking a lot about vulnerability and risk, and that when I enter into conversations with people, how to use a lot of our language intentionally and to try to see if there is some recognition of this work. And I have found that when I speak with people and I use the language of, being seen, heard, and valued, and, and talk a little bit about, putting the human at the front of the work and really designing from the human perspective. I keep going back to it resonates with people. And I have conversations with people where I don't expect it to go that route, but I can tell you right now, I have had a conversation every day over the past 5 days with somebody and have not directly talked about our work, but used our language, and it resonates with people. I had a conversation with someone today. We were talking about curriculum, and it's somebody who I made an incorrect assumption about their beliefs around the role of curriculum. And, they talked about how they're frustrated with how much we're using data to justify bad decisions around curriculum. And at the end of the day, we need to simplify. And the question needs to be, what does each kid need in order to learn and grow? And immediately I was like, she took a risk. And I tried to then use that as an entry point to talk a little bit about some of our beliefs. And I told her that I appreciated that she was willing to say that out loud. And we had a great conversation around fidelity of implementation and how fidelity is a horrible F word. And so, and I guess what I'm saying is that I have found that when I risk and I'm vulnerable about what I believe and I share that has more times than not been rewarded with someone saying, yeah, that resonates or that connects with me. And so I've been thinking about that. The other thing that I would share that I'm from what I'm reading or listening to, I'm very much enjoying Michael Lewis's 3rd season of his podcast Against the Rules, where his focus is on experts and why we don't listen to experts as much as we can. And I think it resonates to some of our thinking around experts and expertise and how we can leverage our insider perspectives and things like that. So I would just share those two things. One is really a thing I'm thinking about. The other is the thing I'm learning from.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend the podcast. I listened to all 3 episodes, one after the other. And he's just a great storyteller. And they all get to the end, the last 5 minutes, and then he hits you with that insight that you're like, damn, that's good. So definitely I'd recommend audience members listening to that. I concur with you on that, Chad. I also appreciate how you're telling your story around using this terminology, because I think people can listen to this and hear like, yeah, it does make sense. It's just not from a theoretical academic sort of in your head kind of way. You're actually tinkering and toying around with the ideas. And I feel like for much of my career, I tinkered and toyed around with the ideas, and that's actually where they came from. And I think that it's interesting that in your practice, you're sort of bringing those to the surface and sharing them with other people. So that's awesome. So I'm always curious about leadership, and I think that I've always intuitively felt like the way that I framed it in my head was a little odd, and I always felt like I was sort of a weird fish in a sea I didn't really want to be in. But like I always thought about leadership in a different way, but was kind of in a system that expected, somebody at the top of the organization to behave in a certain way. And I sort of had to negotiate that and navigate being true to myself, but also meeting expectations, which was not always easy. So that connects to, I like reading multiple things at the same time. And so I'm reading 2 texts at the moment. One's called Complex Adaptive Leadership by Nick Obolensky, and the other's called Stewardship by Peter Block. And they relate to, I think, our leadership mind shift, and this idea that, and they take slightly different angles, but they're really helping me understand a little bit about why I felt the way that I have. And that, this idea, which is reflected in the mind shift, that like everyone's a leader. Like we have this centuries old hierarchy. I think in complex adaptive leadership, they call it the oligarchy, that we have this like paradigm that, you know, there's this hierarchy and that certain people are going to save us and we need to look up to those people and they will tell us what to do. And, you know, that sort of mindset. And I've never felt comfortable with that. I never liked that. But they're both really about this idea that leadership is everywhere and change organically comes out of people exercising that leadership. And so the role of the leader is really to create conditions or create the environment in which people are okay with doing that. And that we really lose a lot when we are grounded in the sort of oligarchy model of, you know, I'm not doing anything because that's not in my pay grade, or, you know, somebody else's title says they do that, not me. And that we really lose a lot of agility within organizations to adapt to rapid change. And I think that's in the Obolensky text. That's his interesting context, is that we need to break down that hierarchy because we are now living in a world where chaos and complexity reign. And in order for organizations and people to adapt to that, they can't wait for one person at the top to send them a message on what to do. They have to have the authority and the okay to actually act upon it.
It's funny because I know that this is not directly creating the conditions, but I will tell you that when in my work, where I work with folks who are doing strategic planning or comprehensive planning, whatever you want to call it, whenever we talk about leadership, I always clarify, when I talk about leadership, I believe that leadership is anyone. So I try to use our language. I believe that leadership is defined as anyone who feels compelled to act in whatever capacity they can. And so I have, in my own way, tried to plant that seed with people that when we're talking about building leadership capacity, it's not just the people sitting behind desks in district offices and in principals' offices. And it's also not just the leadership of the teacher in the classroom. It's every person in an organization has the ability to lead and take a leadership stance wherever they feel compelled to act. And so it's just funny when you brought that up. Like, I've consciously been clarifying that for people in my work as a way to kind of put the flag in the sand, for lack of a better word, and say that leadership is everywhere and everyone can do it.
That's wonderful. All right, so we wanted to thank you for joining us on this week's edition of Inside the Human School, where our goal is to learn in public and share a little bit about what we are learning this week or curious about this week. So if you want to learn more, visit thehuman.school and our Learning in Public Hub for additional resources, and then join us in our conversations on that Facebook community, where our goal is to place humanity at the center of all design. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.